All right, my friends, welcome back to another episode of the Build Show podcast. That's right, we're back in the studio, and we got a fantastic topic for you. I got my buddy Steve Basic here. Steve, how you feeling today?
I can't wait to talk about this.
This is a good topic, Steve. So I had kind of two titles for this, either building for the mold averse or building for extreme health. We're going to be talking on this podcast about, okay, let's say that you've got a client who says, look, I've got some kids that have extreme allergies, whether it's just regular pollen allergies or whether it's mold or whatever. Or frankly, you have a client who says, look, I just want to build the healthiest possible house for me, for my family, whatever. What would you do? And so Steve and I are going to kind of break this down because I kind of thought ahead of time. I've actually been thinking about this topic a lot of late. So we're going to get into what are the goals, what are the methods, and even a little bit of what are the materials if that's your criteria. Really building for somebody who's very sensitive. With that being said, from the Rockwell Studios in Austin, Texas, let's get going. All right, guys, before we jump in with Steve on today's topic, I want to say a big thanks to our podcast sponsor, Embrico. That's MBRICO. I met the founder and the owner of the company, who actually is a builder, a current builder, not even a former builder, who came up with this system for tile decks, which when I first heard about it, I was like, well, of course I've done tile decks. You do a concrete second floor and then you tile over it, right? Well, this is very, very different. Embrico has a system for tile decks, which goes over top of standard 2x deck framing, but instead of putting, a deck board on, a pressure-treated board or some fancy exotic, instead you put this stainless steel, or maybe it's aluminum, I forget, track system down with these tiles which span the distance, and it's not just any old tile. This is a very high-grade Italian porcelain that has a mesh backer system on it, so that you could basically make a flow-through tile deck. The interesting thing about it was this builder is right in the heart of America. I think they're in Iowa, or maybe it was Kansas. I apologize for my Midwestern state friends, but the point was they have very freezing winters, and this tile is totally fine because the water flows through it. There's probably a 1/8, 3/16 gap-ish between the tiles. The water flows right through. And because it's a really high-grade porcelain, it has very, very little water absorption, basically zero water absorption. So they don't have any issues with cracking tile or any of that sort of thing. It was a wild system. If you haven't seen my videos or my Instagram, you should go check it out. Really, really neat system. But one of the coolest things was meeting the founder and the owner, who's a builder, who was trying to find a solution for his projects. And was still building houses, even though he started this really neat company. And now his son runs the tile company, Embrico. So MBRICO. I suspect it's Embrico.com, but just type that into Google, you'll find them. Cool company and really interesting system if you're looking for a fireproof, super bomber deck system that looked to me like it would last for a generation without a problem. All right, Steve, you ready to jump into today's topic?
Yeah, let's talk.
So I've got a friend of mine that is a client that almost built a house with me and ended up not waiting, basically buying an existing home. But they've got 2 kids that are particularly sensitive to mold allergies. And they had a house that they lived in when they first found out about this that had ducts in an unconditioned attic space, as you might imagine, lots of condensation, lots of nasty growth on the ductwork, and the kids just had absolutely horrendous health issues in that house. So they moved out of that house, moved to a house with ducts in the conditioned space, spent a ton of time and effort doing dehumidifiers, doing research, what is it that causes this allergen, what causes mold growth, and basically lived in a house that had massive filtration and massive dehumidifiers and did pretty darn well in that house. So it's making me think, what could I do if I were to build them a house someday? And I suspect people listening as either builders or maybe even there's some homeowners listening to this, have a similar client who has a similar kind of goal for their house. Like, I'm really looking for the best IAQ in my house. I'm looking for extreme health. I'm looking for a house that's very mold resistant. what are the things that you would first immediately think of doing on a house like that?
Yeah. So, I'm going to sound like a somewhat repetitive from a lot of the other stuff that we've done, but, before I can ask to basically control that system or control the mold, I have to provide a controlled environment.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of people immediately go, okay, how can I scrub the air? How can I filter the air? Well, the real question is you should back that truck up a little bit more and say, what is causing the problem? Right. And you did touch upon it. What causes mold?
Yeah.
Right. Mold, by and large, is a moisture problem.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
If I get rid of moisture, then I really can't grow mold. So if I get rid of moisture, I'm kind of solving or helping to solve the mold problem.
Yeah, that's right.
How do I get rid of moisture? Well, I can get rid of bulk water moisture. In terms of condensation, it's controlling the amount of humidity in the air or moisture content in the air, and then controlling the surfaces by which that moisture can condense on.
That's right. Controlling that dew point inside your house.
And controlling how the air moves around the house. And I know someone's going to drop a comment and be like, oh, houses need to breathe. I'm so sick of hearing that. So I'm going to get mean and just say, shut up. Don't put a comment in the bottom and say houses need to breathe. I don't need to hear it anymore. If you're making that argument, you have absolutely no idea on how to solve this problem.
Yeah, that's right. And if we're talking about indoor air quality, there's an interesting dichotomy where, the gold standard for air quality is usually outdoor air, not indoor air. But there's plenty of days when the outdoor air is not very fun. If that were the case, then everyone just would sleep in a tent in their backyard, and we don't, right?
Exactly.
Because
or you
sometimes
sleep with the windows open every day.
Right. Which you can some days, certainly, and depending on where you live. But I can tell you, in my hot, humid Austin, Texas, there's very few days that I have my windows open at all, let alone all night long, because it is extremely humid down here, and we have lots of environmental allergens. There's a lot of cedar pollens. There's a lot of oak pollens. There's a lot of mold growth that happens because we're in a hot, humid climate on various surfaces outdoors. So in general, we don't want to use the outdoor air as the gold standard, but we, of course, do want fresh air in our houses. Right. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To your point on we need to manage water, I think there's an overarching principle of we need a dry house. We need it dry on the inside from inside moisture, and we need it dry on the outside from outside moisture. And so I want to focus for a minute.
And if it gets wet, we need it to dry relatively fast. We don't want it to stay wet. It's okay if something got wet, as long as we can dry it pretty quick.
Exactly, that's right. Then no issues happen. So let's talk for a minute about exterior moisture first, because to your point, we need to build a really tight envelope so we can gain control of our environment. We've talked about this many times in many locations. But we also need to make sure that the house is dry. That's dry from rain from the ground, that's dry from rain from the sky, and that's dry from blowing rain, let's say. And so I would say if your client comes to you and says, I'm looking for a house for extreme health or for the mold adverse, first off, we want to build the most forgiving house possible when it comes to water, which means, we want at least 8 inches or maybe a foot of foundation showing before we hit natural grade, which means we probably want overhangs in this house and as much forgiveness as possible from rainwater from the sky hitting the house. Pitched roofs are going to move moisture and rainwater away from the house much faster than a flat roof will, and are generally more forgiving as time passes when it comes to keeping the house dry. So I tend to lean towards more traditional architecture with good overhangs, with potentially awnings and front porches, and really thinking about all the ways that we're going to keep the exterior moisture down and out and away from our houses.
It's really interesting because a lot of people, when you say let's do something to an extreme, they think that you have to pose some level of extreme measures. No, you have to be extreme in basically common sense, I would say, right? And it's like, I'm going to go Seinfeld on you, right? If you had these immune deficiencies, right, that were extreme, what would they do? They'd make you a bubble boy.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? They'd put you in a bubble, and you would live in an environment that was 100% controlled.
That's right.
And so why wouldn't we think along those lines when we're building a house and create an environment that I now control?
Oh, that's a great analogy.
And then once I control it, I can dial in that environment, because it's like anything else. I can just turn whatever knobs. I can dehumidify, I can humidify, I can elevate temperature, I can lower temperature. I can do all of those things if I have control.
That's right, for sure. Back to my thought about interior and exterior water. I also was thinking, okay, so now we've built a great house. The architecture has given us some forgiveness. We've got good water management details on the outside. We also need to manage water in the interior. And this is a rabbit hole we could probably take some time on. But let's think about the biggest water source and the biggest source of probably humidity and general bulk water in our houses is our showers.
Yeah.
So,
or lifestyle.
Lifestyle, true.
Showers, cooking, breathing.
Breathing does it too. Let's break those down. I actually want to hit all those. So first, let's think showers. You know, if you're going to build a shower, there's multiple ways you can do it. And one of the most forgiving ways when it comes to having that shower dry would be to use a cast iron tub, where you've either got some type of surround that doesn't have any type of water absorption on it, or the least amount possible. So for instance, you know, a shower pan that's built traditionally would have a mud base and then would have tile on top of it with a sloped pan underneath the mud. And the problem with those is they tend to hold water and they stay wet for a long time. So a traditional shower, at least in Texas, is an area where we see a fair amount of microbial growth in the bottom couple inches, because the shower pan, the mud bed, gets and stays wet. On the other hand, if we use something like the Schluter system, for instance, it's a pre-sloped pan that has a foam base and then a membrane on top of that sloping that the tile directly adheres to. So there's no mortar bed, there's nothing that's going to get and stay wet. And then if you were to even go one step further and instead of using a traditional grout, use, let's say, an epoxy grout that wouldn't absorb any water, that's basically the assembly I've got in my master shower. And I can tell you, Steve, that my master shower dries within probably 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I think the term is, you know, we use it a lot on the outside, but reservoir cladding. And it doesn't necessarily mean just the siding on the outside of the wall. It could be a reservoir cladding is something on the floor, right? If it soaks up water and holds water, it's acting like a reservoir to hold that moisture content. That's
right. Definitely. So then moving outward from, let's say, the shower in a bathroom, the next place that's going to generate water is going to be sinks, is going to be kitchen sinks, lavatory faucets, toilets, that sort of thing. The next thing I think is really important to think about is the emergency that happens where the toilet overflows, where the washer and dryer overflows, where possibly the sink overflows. I think that paying special attention to emergency water is really an important aspect for somebody that has extreme health or particularly is mold averse.
Yeah, when those things leak, they're going to leak into an area that you really can't reconcile easy, right? It's going to dump water into a wall assembly, a floor assembly, something that's blind and hidden that you either have to open up to address or you live with it in the hope that it really isn't that bad and it dries quick.
Yeah, that's right. And if you really did have a kid that was very mold averse, for instance, you would probably bring a company in that would spend a lot of your money addressing a water leak issue. So my thought is anything that could leak, let's put a pan in so that it leaks down a drain. So for instance, at my bathroom where my kids are upstairs, both bathrooms are upstairs, I put shower drains in the floor basically. So it's a floor drain. What I didn't do that I probably would go to the next step up is putting cabinet drains in. I have an architect that I've worked with that specifies that and likes to do it all the time. I've only done it once before, but I think if you really were extreme in your averseness, that could be something to consider as well. We basically brought a drain into the bottom of the plywood cabinets. We also made sure that all our cabinets were true plywood. And then we put a lip on the front where the doors open into the cabinet so that you basically had a painted pan, so to speak, out of the plywood with a drain inside the cabinet. I mean, it was extreme, but you know, if you really are extreme, that's not not a bad way to go.
Well, the question then is, right, at what cost is your kid's health?
Right. And how far do you want to go?
How far do you want to go?
Yeah, that's right. Beyond that, another great option would be a leak detection type device. There's a bunch of them out there. The Uponor Fin device. I know that the drop system that we're about to install has a leak detector. There's a bunch out there, but it's basically a flow meter with a brain attached that can say, hey, wait a minute, we're not supposed to be sending water out at 2 a.m. Nobody's supposed to be showering now with this slow amount of moisture coming out or slow amount of flow on the paddle. We're going to stop the water now and send an alert to somebody's phone.
And some devices, I know there's some water heaters. I think Rheem, we put one in that has leak detection, or excessive flow detection, right? I mean, you can call it whatever you want, but that's what it's monitoring and saying, hey, it's a 50-gallon. Why have we run 60 gallons to this tank? There's something here,
Something's
and it
wrong.
shuts down.
Yeah, I like that. In going another step beyond that, I think that water heaters and ACs should have a backup and potentially a backup for the backup when it comes to water. So, for instance, at the Reisinger build that you designed, you gave us a hallway closet interior of the house for our heat pump water heater. The heat pump water heater will have an emergency drain pan, but then that whole closet has a tiled waterproof floor with a drain in it. We also did that for the AC closet on the first floor, where it's got its own basically tiled waterproofed floor, plus the emergency drain pan and the emergency overflow device that says, hey, this pan has got water in it, let's shut this system off.
Yeah, you know, and one of the things, you know, when we're talking about this, the thing I can see is, you know, all these people commenting, oh, these guys are crazy. All they want to do is spend clients' money. Understand that there's your typical client, and then there's some extreme clients that we both, you know, get and have experienced that come with very, very situational problems. And they're looking for those problems to be solved.
That's right.
And so that's what we're talking about here is the kind of extreme version of how do we do that? Because there are some people out there that get more sick. I'm not saying every house has to have drain and drain. Right. But if somebody comes to you and says, hey, my wife is, you know, we lived in a moldy house, she's sick all the time, et cetera, what they're doing is they're really crying for solutions.
That's right.
And asking you, we want to hire you because we need those solutions.
Yeah. And I think it's our job to show them what the options are and give them some idea of relative cost and let them choose from that. Right. And I'm not saying that we would do every one of these things, but we would at least say, hey, the riskier things I think you should do. And beyond that, these smaller risk items, well, that's up to you. But here's what that would look like.
But I mean, we've done the you know, when talking about bathrooms, like we've done bathrooms where like the shower is over on one side, but you basically treat the whole floor of the bathroom as a shower pan.
Yeah, I love that.
Right. So you like walk in, so now you can hose down
the whole bathroom.
The whole bathroom, because it's all draining to that one drain.
It's kind of what they do in Japan on a regular basis.
There's a lot of countries that do these slightly different things.
Which makes a lot of sense.
Which makes a lot of sense. In America, it's like we're really quick to judge in America, man, and in the building industry especially. If you just veer 1 or 2 degrees, people are up in arms. Why would you do that?
That's so expensive.
That's so expensive. You're wasting money. That's a stupid idea. Well, maybe it is to you.
Yeah, that's right. But maybe it's not to this client.
Not to this client.
Let's keep going on the HVAC system because I think there's a lot to talk about here. Obviously, we're going to make sure all our ducts are in the conditioned space. We're never going to put ducts in a hot attic. That's number one.
Stupid.
But when it comes to HVAC, the actual heating and cooling system, let's call it a heat pump or gas or whatever we're going to use, I think that the most metal we can have in the system, the better, because it's going to be the most cleanable and it's going to be the least potential for microbial growth. So I would eliminate duct board 100% from a system like that. We don't want any duct board in the system. And I would limit the amount of flexible duct as well, Not because I think that flex duct is a problem, but because I think that if you were regularly cleaning your ducts, let's say if you really had a kid that had a problem and you wanted to clean your ducts once a year, I think the flex ducts would last less long than a true metal, let's say, trunk line system.
Yeah. And in any system that we're trying to get extreme performance out of, we're probably upping all of the parts. And I agree. It's like there's nothing wrong with flex duct in 90% of the houses or 99% of the houses that get built. But there is a very small percentage where maybe that isn't the best choice.
Yeah, that's right. I would also say that for the most part, we want to opt for not low static pressure systems, but higher static pressure systems. Meaning, I think a traditional, upflow or horizontal mounted system works well for somebody like this because it's going to have excellent filtration. You know, we can put in at a minimum, let's say a MERV 13, possibly a MERV 15, or we could even go to something like the IQ. Have you ever seen the IQ air filtration system?
No, I can't say that.
It's basically a hospital grade HEPA type filtration system. But because it's so massive, it doesn't have a lot of static pressure drop between them. And it's a Swiss-made product. And IQ Air also makes a bunch of standalone units. And in particular, my client that has some kids that have some issues, they've got those standalone units around the house. And they're pretty, they're like $1,500, $2,000 per, but they're really top of the line, really, really good filtration. So I kind of like the idea of a higher filtration, high static pressure system that's going to run more often when it comes to the heating and cooling system.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
And then let's jump into dehumidification, because anybody that has this issue needs absolutely separate dehumidification. And I would say a bit of redundancy in their dehumidification as well. You know, you generally want at least one unit per floor on the house. So if you have a 2-story house, you're going to want an upstairs and a downstairs dehumidifier. And if you have a bigger house, you're probably going to want to zone that to some degree, where let's say you've got one zone for this section, one zone for that section. The other thing to think about, I think, with dehumidifiers, Steve, is I've found over the years that we want to upsize dehumidifiers rather than downsize them. Meaning I'd rather have a little extra capacity, and especially as we get into my next topic, which is fresh air. This is one that I know you have been using for years. For instance, the Zender systems that I've seen you use, like the first time I saw it on Dan Roy's house, totally blew my mind. But a really solid fresh air system for somebody that has health issues, I think, is a great way to go. Do you want to comment on that and talk? Take a minute on that.
I think there's a general overarching concept here that when we talk about gaining control, one of the ways that you gain control is compartmentalizing a bunch of facets that allow for control, right? So we can do really good extreme air tightness, but people say buildings need to breathe. And actually, I agree with you. I just want to control the location and the volume of the breathing.
That's right.
Right? But I agree, buildings should breathe. I'm not arguing that. So in terms of, say, the Zender, that gives us the ability to gain control through air tightness, but we compartmentalize the amount of air that's coming into the building, how we filter it, how we treat it. And the same with dehumidification. Having it as a separate system means we can literally have this kind of wall of dials where we just go up, and we can say, depending on your child's condition, we can just turn this dial up, turn this one up, and turn this one down.
I really like that.
And basically tune the house to your child.
Yeah, that's right. And one thing to remember that I've kind of learned from my own house is when we upgrade to a higher amount of fresh air in the house, we have to remember that ERVs are not dehumidifiers. And in particular in Austin, where it's so humid, if I've got my system on high because I'm looking for a greater amount of fresh air, I'm bringing in more humidity with that. So I need to have the extra capacity in my dehumidifiers to bring that humidity back down.
And how about a little myth buster? People think immediately outside air is better air, right? And I remember being at Building Science Corporation and having this exact conversation with Joe, and him saying that the lawyer told him to never refer to it as fresh air.
Interesting.
It can only, he says, if you're talking about it, it's outside air. Because you can never how do you guarantee the metric of it being fresh? How do you guarantee it's better than outside air?
That's a great point.
Right? You can't. So all you can say is, hey, it came from outside.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it's better.
Yeah,
and I have some clients, and you've met them, and I'm sure you have some clients that say, listen, I don't like leaving my house.
Yeah.
Because the best environment I know is inside the walls.
That's right, for sure. And that's one of the reasons why I like Zender in particular is the filtration is so high.
Yeah.
And I've even added a pre-filter on my house to get that extra level of filtration, but it's near HEPA level. So yes, it's outside air, but it's not the same as opening your window because we're getting an extreme amount of filtration. Plus, we're exchanging both heat and humidity with the outgoing and incoming streams because it's a balanced outside air system.
Yeah, we've actually had people, when I was working at Building Science Corporation, we did a few projects, and my own clients since then on projects that they will tell you, like, I used to have asthma or had some problems. Now, I'm not sitting here saying this is a cure-all, that everybody needs to go out and do this, but I have had clients that said, hey, it seems like it's gone away.
Wow.
When I live in my house.
That's
or
amazing.
I dream better. You've heard me talk about that. You know, that they just dream better or sleep better. I have one client that a couple, they have two houses. One that she absolutely detests going to because it's an old piece of crap. And the new mountainside house that we did for them, and she's like, I go there and it's like it's a totally different world.
So
and it's
cool.
Not even like it's barely noticeable. It is extremely noticeable how much better she feels there.
That's wild.
And this whole mountain house for them is they go up there, they go snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, running, biking.
Mm-hmm.
They're a very active outdoor. And she says, our recovery is so much higher in that house.
That's so cool.
Than when they live in the other house.
That's really neat.
And do the same activities.
Power of a well-built house.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
You know, like I said, it's only a couple samples. You can believe it or not believe it. It's up to you. You make that choice. But I'm telling you, I have clients that would die saying, you know, it's a better environment.
So I've got two more topics on this front that we may or may not have time for, but let me throw them out and see what you think. I think it'd be interesting to talk for a minute and get your take on ductless as a system, knowing that we've got extreme health in mind. Like, what if we just eliminate the ducts altogether?
Yep.
And then also, I want to spend a minute saying or thinking about, like, would I build it out of standard building materials? Like, would I try and eliminate sheetrock, let's say, knowing that paper facing is the most broken down product typically in houses? So let's start with ductless first. What's your take on that? Like,
yeah, I mean, ductless, you get rid of ducts. People are worried about, the ducts, they collect dirt, and there's stuff that can collect inside them. We talked about flex versus sheet metal.
Mm-hmm.
Why not just eliminate the ducts in general?
Yeah.
And not only eliminate it, we're doing a barn-dominium project that I don't think I've ever showed you, but like the hallway walls, let's say those are 4 foot and they're 9 foot tall.
Mm-hmm.
The walls at the bedroom are 8 foot wide. And so there's this void where the bedrooms all communicate with the hallway from a height of 9 foot above. The walls kind of overlap a little. And there's about an 18-inch space. So, yes, you have to deal with the light, but it's an older couple that they're just live there by themselves and do things. But the whole house is kind of interconnected from a distribution standpoint. And we worked with the guys down in Energy Vanguard. They did a beautiful job laying out Zender and all of that. And but yeah, I mean, getting back to your point, why not get rid of it? Just put in kind of point source control heating and cooling and eliminate ductwork.
Makes a lot of sense. Then just do a couple of 2 or 3 standalone dehumidifiers that just have a short return duct and a short supply duct, and then you basically have no ductwork in your house. I didn't really get into this, but I was thinking, if IAQ and health are a concern for you, you have to know that you're going to spend a little bit more money than the average homeowner on maintenance, probably, because you're really going to have to be specific about filter changes, about annual cleans, about an annual check. those kinds of things. So you can't be the kind of person who's like, oh, I want to set it and forget it, right?
Yeah, but that comes with the territory, because someone that requires that house has more medical visits. They have more costs in the medical industry.
Yes, that's right.
Right? They have more, diagnostics.
Right, that's right.
From the medical field
Yeah.
because of who they are.
Yeah.
So, this just kind of translates to, if you're going to build a house, then it's going to be above and beyond, just because your life is requiring above and beyond.
That's right, for sure. Let's end with this. Tell me what your thoughts are on, let's say, eliminating sheetrock or reducing risk from sheetrock or any other type of change from quote unquote normal or standard construction materials or practices.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things cost more, certainly. Some of them cost a little, or a lot more. I actually had a client probably about 8 years ago. We did a very large addition. She says, all the materials, no adhesives, no sealants, no caulking. Think about that for a second. That eliminates plywood, OSB, all of this stuff. We did board sheathing.
Is that right?
For the floor sheathing.
Wow.
Board sheathing for the walls.
Board sheathing meaning like 1x8s.
Yeah. Nailed diagonally across the floor.
Old school, baby.
I went to the structural engineer. He's like, you really want to do this? Got to the framer and he's like, you really want to do this? It's like, yes, guys.
Yes.
It's not in the drawings because I'm guessing, right? It's in there because this is what this client wants. And she's like, I don't care what it costs. And the framing job was probably close to 2x.
Wow.
By the time we were done.
And you use that for sheathing on the house too?
We used it for sheathing.
That's
the structural engineer had to,
Yeah.
Figure it out using the sheathing, the right nailing.
He had to engineer up, didn't he, or she?
He definitely engineered up. He's like, man, I haven't even thought about this in years.
I love it.
But wall sheathing, roof sheathing, everything.
Yeah.
But she was extremely happy. I have talked to her after that. She's like, I love my house.
That's so
I
great.
don't have any problems living there. And, it is what it is. Some people might say, yeah, it's probably in her head. Or
well, did she go to lath and plaster then?
Yes, we did.
She did?
Yes,
Okay.
we did do some of that. We didn't do sheetrock in this house.
Okay, gotcha.
So
like old school,
we
like
did a
wood
little
lath?
like wood lath, and we did a plaster on it.
Whoa,
Yes.
that's awesome.
So
how cool.
finding people to do that stuff, or
Not
in
easy.
a lot of cases, we'd do just basically a wood board paneling or tongue and groove or something like that.
Yeah.
We would do
I mean,
that.
you
So-
could do a wood paneling and then wallpaper over it too,
Yeah.
frankly. I've been to a bunch of remodels from the 30s in Austin that have had that same exact detail where they have a 1x8 wall lath and then they wallpapered over it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those assemblies work.
work very well too.
I would like to get some experts' take on mold-resistant drywall and or fiberglass-faced drywall that then you come in and plaster over.
Yeah.
With like a like a lime-based plaster
Yep.
or a what's the one that's the colors integrated that I've done a couple times. I can't think of it all of a sudden. There's a real earthen plaster that has a color integrated. It's lime-based or clay-based.
Yeah. It's a good question for drywall shorty.
American clay tile.
Okay.
Or American clay plaster. That's it. It's been a while since I've done it, but I did a whole house. It was an older couple that liked the look, and so we did. They didn't have, this wasn't a mold reason for them. It was a looks reason.
Yep.
But we basically did standard 5/8 sheetrock everywhere, and did a fire tape and then stopped, and then they basically plastered the entire house with this American clay plaster, and it looked fabulous.
And the color was fully integrated.
Color's fully integrated. It looked like the stucco wall behind us because
Yeah.
it was real. They burnished it
Yep.
and burned it in, and it had this real mottled look. It was a bear to touch up because you'd have to do wall to wall if you ever had a problem.
Exactly. Exactly.
But we basically did it last. We did it after the trades were done with trim outs, the whole shebang. It was at the very end, and it was beautiful.
It's sad that we don't search out more of this, because I'm sure, like in our passing, even for us that have been doing it for a very long time, I'm sure there's systems that I probably never even heard of that have gone by the wayside that are really successful type systems.
Yeah, that's right.
But we just push them out because we're always striving to do this kind of commodity solution.
Yeah.
That's the cheapest and easiest, and that's what my drywaller does.
Yep.
Right? But to find somebody in New England, we're a little bit fortunate. We're going to like a lath and plaster or something. You can find guys. We do plaster. Like, yeah, if you want to do it, it's going to
Sure,
cost
I'll do
more.
it for you.
But, you know, we'll do it. We haven't done it in years. And it's like, you know, next thing you know, they're bringing dad out of retirement. And you know, he's there trying to give him a class on how to do
85-year-old
this.
dude
Yeah,
doing the plastering.
doing the plastering in there. And he's like, yeah, I haven't done this since 58. You know,
That's awesome. I love it.
But whatever the case is.
That's good stuff. Well, there's probably 10 more topics we can get into on this, but I think we should do a separate podcast on chemically sensitive people too, because I'm certainly no expert in either one of these, but I would say that you and I both are experts in dry houses and water management, which we need to be experts on,
and air management.
And air management, and ultimately, if we can manage water and air, we can manage everything in the house, I believe.
I think so. So,
Steve, thanks for joining me in the Rockwell Studios here.
Always a pleasure.
If you guys aren't already, go check out Steven's Instagram feed, Steven Basic Architect, on Instagram, and he's got, I don't know how many videos now, 1,000 videos on thebuildshow.com.
Yep.
Steve, you are the original OG on the Build Show. You were one of the first 5, along with me and Brent Hull, Wade Paquin, and Jake Bruton. And I appreciate your friendship and your partnership in building better houses, my friend.
Yeah, no, all good stuff.
For sure. Guys, if you're not currently, hit that subscribe button. We've got new podcasts every Friday. Follow us both on Facebook or Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on the Build Show podcast.